Hey, Mike, what do Kelly Slater and PT have in common?
I don't know. They're both world champs?
Nope, they both own Endless Summer box set.
Oh my God, rad. You guys, you can get it too. The link's in the show notes. Welcome back, everybody, to the QuiverCast. This is Mike, your host, and this is all brought to you by YourAudioLegacy.com and QuiverBuilder.com. And please check out my other podcast, The Stinky Booties, I do with my buddy, Billy. Let's roll. Hello, everybody. This is Mike here with the QuiverCast, and we have a very special guest today, Hank Warner, who's for sure one of the oldest San Diego surfers around. Would you say that, Hank?
Or is that maybe the oldest Grimmy? There was people way before me, but
okay. How many of those guys are still surfing today?
Well, Skip Fry's still surfing.
Okay.
And a lot of the guys, L.J. Richards.
Yep.
We've lost quite a few people in the last year or so.
Okay.
But when I say guys that have been surfing longer than me, there was Skeeter Malcolm, who passed away in the 90s, that was surfing in the 30s and 40s until discovered most of the spots. And then Lloyd Baker, who was considered the first custom shaper back in the early 40s.
What was he shaping?
Just big old wood boards. The reason why I bring those guys up is because how I got into building surfboards was through Billy Castor, who was dating my sister back in 1960, 61, and then they got married in 65 and both remained married until they both passed away at different times. But Billy Castor had aunts, and they were married to Lloyd Baker and the other one, Marsh and Skeeter Malcolm, who the Malcolms. They had a daughter, Marilyn Malcolm, one of the first group of female surfers. But Marsh Malcolm was a teacher out in Crawford, which is way inland. So a lot of guys that are still on the surf scene, like Hoy Runnels, that shaped surfboards very well, they all got introduced to surfing through Marsh Malcolm. Lloyd Baker was an old San Diegan that had Lloyd's Music City, Lloyd's Gym, started Select Surfboards, which evolved into Olympic Surfboards, and eventually Select Surf Shop. And they all kind of got Billy Castor into shaping boards back in the late 50s. And so that's where I came in the scene when I was about 10 years old. Billy was dating my sister. And I kind of just got into the whole factory thing, too, after that.
At 10, or you were like interested at 10?
Well, that's when he started hooking up with my sister. But at 11, I was riding my bike all the way over to the Olympic Surfboard Factory and getting 35 cents a board to take the wax off the old boards.
Oh, you're getting paid?
Oh, yeah. Paycheck. Right. And, then...
Was 35 cents a lot then?
Well, minimum wage was like 90 cents, so,
okay.
Cheap labor. $1.05 an hour. That was pretty good. Of course, you only worked for an hour.
Okay.
But what do you need?
Yeah.
But San Diego-wise, if you're interested in that, my mom's father, Magner White, worked for the San Diego Sun. And in 1921, he wrote a story about the eclipse of the sun that they still mention in the Evening Tribune, San Diego Union today, whenever we have an eclipse of the sun. But in 1990, they republished his Pulitzer Prize winning story. He won the first Pulitzer Prize for a news story west of the Mississippi. And then my dad's dad was a businessman, but he was a county supervisor and actually ran for mayor of San Diego and was runner-up in 1944.
Wow.
My real name is the same as his name. My dad's in the middle. But so anyway, a lot of San Diego roots, and then it came down to my mom and dad moved to the beach, in which in 1949, 1950, you don't live at the beach unless you're a beatnik or something else, retired, but to actually raise a family. So I was fortunate enough to, from birth, be 25 feet from the sand in Mission Beach. So that's how I got into the water all the time and started going from there. One interesting story is a family that kind of looked out for us down in South Mission Beach. Had a daughter who was a great surfer at the time, Penny McGuire. And Skip Fry, who I had just met because the G&S Surfboard Factory was 2 blocks north of Crystal Pier, he wanted to kind of get to know her, and I happened to know her phone number because it was one number different than our home phone. So he ended up going down there and kind of hanging out in their garage and sleeping down there. But the first summer I got to know really Skip really well when I was 12. He'd walk up, knock on my door about 10 minutes to 7, ride me on my bike from Mission Beach up to Crystal Pier and start surfing. So, I was lucky enough to be in the group of people like Mike Henson, Skip Fry, Butch Van Arsdale, and Gary Cook, Mickey Madden, just a lot of them, Billy Castor that surf. So at that time, they were happy to take us anywhere surfing. Even though we were Grimmy, we'd be out of their way. So it was a good life to grow up in the 50s in Mission Beach, PB, and then get into surfing in the 60s and up until now.
Okay, so what was the age difference between you and like the Butches and the Skip Fries?
About 8-9 years.
Okay, big difference kind of at that.
Like right now, I'm 72. Skip is 80.
Okay.
Henson's about the same age. Butch was maybe a year or two older at the time. Billy Castor was... My sister was 4 years older than me. Billy Castor was probably 6 years older.
Wow.
But, back then, there wasn't that many kids that could carry a board around. And luckily I didn't have to carry it too far because I just was in a stone's throw of the ocean. So
yeah. Did you paddle back to the pier?
No, I would actually take the board, get on the boardwalk, put my foot up on the seawall, put the board on my shoulder, and then ride my bike, the mile or so up to Crystal Pier, which you couldn't do now because there's so many people on that boardwalk. But back in 1961 and that, you could ride in the wintertime and never see anybody on that boardwalk.
Okay, so was it like, were you guys like the only family probably, and generally speaking?
Well, there was the McGuires, there was the McGriffs, famous surf guys, J.D. McGriff, Pat McGriff. But they lived right there in South Mission. Keith Knoll, Alan Murray, Ricky Vansel. A lot of people that came to the beach and surfed came from Mission Hills at the time. That's where my family was from before they actually moved to the beach.
Okay.
But that was a time where you'd get up to the pier when you're 11, 12, 13, 14. You'd wait until a friend showed up so you could have someone to paddle out with. Nowadays, that's not happening.
Yeah. Okay. So I have several questions. What made your family want to move to the beach, and why did they?
Cheap real estate.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It's totally reversed now.
It's totally reversed. But, just like, it used to be.
So they're getting a nice house for cheaper.
Yeah. Well, my dad bought a couple of lots in South Mission for $2,500 a piece.
Oh. You still own those?
No. God, I wish we did. In 1950, and my parents divorced a couple years later, so he doubled his money. He sold them. He sold the lots and with 4 units on them for like twice what he paid.
Right.
And I ran into a guy maybe 30 years ago that lived at the same place. And I said, well, that's funny. My dad built those. Do you know you could actually add on to the roofs of those 2 duplexes on each side because they're made for upstairs. But they sold it for $325,000. And now there's 4 multi-million-dollar condos on that property.
They tore them down?
They tore down his property. And it's funny about that. If you're familiar with Mission Beach and Belmont Park, my baby crib was probably the closest sleeping quarter to that roller coaster.
Really?
That's why I've never been on it, because all I can remember from my crib is click, 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 click,
oh,
click.
No.
People going down that.
And you've never been on it?
Never been on it. As a matter of fact, relatives and people would come to visit us at the beach for 4th of July.
Yeah.
We're going up to the amusement park. No thanks, because I didn't even want to get close enough where they could talk me into doing it.
Really?
Now, years later,
interesting.
I had my first child at 53. He's now 19. And he's Wyatt. He's been on that thing back when he was 10 years old.
All right.
He said, Dad, it's no problem. Just go on it like 5 or 6 times, then it's not scary anymore.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm not getting on it once.
Do you like roller coasters in general?
Not particularly, no.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not particularly.
That ruined you.
Especially now you get going too fast.
Oh, those ones are nuts out there now.
I mean, I went with a girl to Disneyland, and I got shamed. I had to go on the Space Mountain.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too bad. Then I went on the toboggan ride,
Matterhorn.
the Matterhorn. That was pretty good, but, that was sitting next to a teenage girl. You had to look good.
Yeah.
So I thought, years later, I can handle it. Well, I went on Space Mountain with my son when he was about 10.
Okay.
I came out of that feeling like I was having a stroke. So
That's
scared me
it's
of
not
roller
your
coasters.
thing.
Scared me of roller coasters.
Yeah. Okay, so now I had a lot of questions about being an early family on the beach. How was it? Were there days where you paddled out by yourself?
Oh, well, in that time frame, really, the lifeguards never went north of Crystal Pier.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of no man's land. And right out in front of my house, there was a group of guys that would surf there.
Oh, okay.
But for the most part, the boardwalk was empty.
Yeah.
This was before they started doing the signs where you couldn't surf before 6 o'clock or after 11 a.m. But you could just paddle out if you wanted to anywhere, try to catch a sandbar, which was good to learn because the way Mission Beach breaks.
Yeah.
If it was big, it breaks, reforms, and then you could kind of catch the reform and actually get a swell and ride it. But there was no lifeguards out in front of my house, Kennebec Court, Ensenada Court, and at the jetty. The boardwalk didn't go all the way down there. It was a long, lonely, sandy walk to get out to the jetty. But when it was big, that was a place where people could surf. Okay.
So some more questions. Is the sand different now than it was, or is it kind of the same?
Well, the sand's come and gone. There was a time when in the storms in the late 60s, 69, washed a lot of the sand away, and you could see the old boardwalk. And they started replenishing the sand by dredging it out and pouring it down, which one thing it did really well was Tourmaline Canyon was all rocks, heavy rocks. Matter of fact, walking from Law Street, about 6 blocks north of Crystal Pier, north, you would be walking on rocks. Now that's all sand because all that sand kind of got hooked up to PV Point and filled in. So that created a better beach.
Better waves?
That's a question. We always think the waves were better when we were younger, but there was nobody to compete with you for them, so you always thought they were better.
Okay.
Plus, when you get older, you only remember the good days, not the bad days.
Okay, fair.
So, talking to Skip Fry, he thinks the biggest difference between now and back in the 60s and 70s is it's windier now. Because I do remember it used to kind of stay glassy.
Was there a kelp bed or anything out there?
Yeah, well, there was more kelp. Now, the Kelco company would cut down the kelp, and there would be times when it would come in and be all up and down the beach. But, I mean, we're speaking in extremes to describe the subtleties, but I remember it seemed like it glassed off earlier and stayed glassy longer. But we always had that summertime northwest breeze come in around 11, 12 o'clock, and then back off around 4 and 5. But that was good because that wind kept the wind swell up, so when it did glass off, we still had some peaky waves.
Coming out of the north.
Yeah, I mean, that's when we had no idea where the surf came from. We just knew. In the summertime, you'd surf Southbird and Wind and Sea. And in the wintertime, you could surf La Jolla Shores, PB Point, Tourmaline. Never really realized the swells were coming from so far away.
Okay.
Those big New Zealand swells, would take 10 days to get here. You just living in the beach, you woke up, you looked at the surf. If there was waves, you went surfing. There wasn't. There was no waves. Nowadays, anywhere there's an ocean, people can anticipate a day ahead of time.
At least.
Or a week ahead of time where they're going to go and show up. I liked it when it was just, if you lived at the beach, you got it.
Okay, so I got so many questions. Okay, let's talk about Mission Jetty, South Jetty.
Right.
Okay. How many guys were out there then? I know it's kind of like, now it's kind of known as being like, if you don't live there, you don't surf there.
Well, yeah, the local guys kind of hang out the peak. Because,
are they true locals, do you think?
There are some guys there.
That have been there for
There's some
decades?
guys that have been there for a long time that grew up. Okay. Most of them are quite a bit younger than I am, but they did grow up there. And some of them lived there, some of them moved away. But, it's just a real tight peak when the waves are good bouncing off the jetty. So that's what makes it more competitive.
Yeah. One takeoff zone?
Yeah, but it's a great place to surf on certain wind conditions and certain swell conditions. And I remember in 1968 or 9, I took Jerry Lopez there, maybe 1970. And, he had no trouble catching all the waves he wanted. He ripped it up, those lefts.
But he was a legend, kind of.
Yeah.
Legendary.
This was kind of this was pre the pipeline days.
Okay.
He was riding a Hansen hollow board.
Really?
With a lightning bolt. So that's what brought him to San Diego.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. So how'd you hook up with him and make friends?
Because I hung out at Select Surf Shop, which was owned by Phil Casagnola.
Okay.
Who at one time was part owner of Olympic Surfboards with Billy Castor. But then Billy Castor got drafted in 65. When he came back a couple years later, he started his Castor label, and Phil took the Olympic label. And anyway, then Phil started a surf shop, called it a Select Surf Shop, basically off of the old boards that were Select surfboards from Lloyd Baker that Billy Castor learned how to shape on. And Select Surf Shop, so I would hang out there. And that's when Jerry Lopez would make an appearance trying to sell the Hansen hollow boards. And hey, it happened to be a good day. So my friend Kurt Slater and I took him down to the jetty, and he ripped it up. Did his little side slip thing like he was first filmed doing at the Huntington Beach contest with the orange helmet on. But it was a good day. And as for locals, I didn't remember seeing anybody or anything. It got in our way.
Yeah. All right, more questions. What was that hollow board? I mean, how was it shaped compared to, like, it literally was hollow?
Well, it was the hollow wave came out with the board. They had the honeycomb construction.
Okay.
And they were molded. The Hansen one was the same thing. It was hollow. It had a little valve in the front where you could take it off and let the air, as it expanded with the heat.
Wow.
Some of the funny things when they first started selling those things, they put the plug in the nose, send it in an airplane to the East Coast. Well, the altitude change of the airplane would just blow those things up. So they started realizing, you got to take the plug out and let it breathe. But, it was just another way to try to make cheaper, stronger surfboards as they went from long boards to shorter boards.
Like during late 70s?
From 67 to 69 is when boards started getting cut down. Okay. And oddly enough, those old vintage boards that people value so highly now, the reason why there's so much value is because I'd say 80% of those got cut down to a shorter board.
They were a short longboard initially.
I mean, people wanted to go short so quickly that you couldn't build them fast enough, and so they would
just take them more to the garage or whatever?
And take a saw and cut it down and shape a smaller board out of it. So that's what happened to a lot of those boards.
Were they doing it themselves, or they come and find guys like you that knew board shapes?
They'd do it themselves because that's when I started shaping boards. There was no kind of standard, and everything kind of worked.
Okay.
It was short. And that was the days where you go to Mitch's Surf Shop, and for $31 you could buy a blank fiberglass resin, a glass-on fin rope, glossine resin, acetone, and build your own board in the garage.
For $31?
$31, yeah.
Which is kind of a lot of money probably back then.
Well, it was cheaper than a new board that was going to cost you like $140.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, and then do you think those boards would ever come back? In today's technology, like the hollow boards?
Well,
is there
they
anything
have them
similar?
now. I mean, those guys that...
who's shaping those? Or building those?
They're not really shaped. They're
machine shaped?
Molded.
Molded, okay.
Off of boards in the Orient. That's where, your firewires and stuff come from.
Okay, yeah.
And then a lot of other kind of exotic hollow boards.
Interesting.
Being a guy that's shaped surfboards for over 50 years, I'm kind of anti those. And
you're anti. What are you anti? Not made in America.
Like wherever they're made, that's fine. But they just the kids nowadays that grow up on them, they're happy with them. But there was a flex factor in every surfboard, like a wooden surfboards that up until the mid 50s, those are very stiff and would just plow through the chop. Really nice.
Okay.
And then the other extreme...
Kind of like more like a boat?
Yeah. And then you get a boogie board that's got a lot of flex. Well, those kind of flex out and absorb the energy. So a surfboard that was fiberglass that actually had some bend to it, had some life to it.
Okay.
And that's why the riding them standing up felt so different than a soft board or the old balsa boards.
Okay. Do you remember your first jumping on your first fiberglass? Regular. What was the difference between like a balsa or a wood board?
I was like 75 pounds and the board was 9'6". So my sister's boyfriends.
The wood board or the?
No, the first board I got on was actually a Hobie.
Okay.
And got pushed into a soup in Mission Beach, and by the time I stood up, it reformed. And I rode it all the way to the beach, and they said, "Oh, you're a natural." So, of course, the second one wasn't as easy, but the first wave made surfing seem easy.
Yep.
Then what happened was living in Mission Beach and being a San Diegan, and our family was San Diegan, on our court at the time when I was a teenager, 11 years old, Kennebec Court. Most people that lived there came from the Midwest or someplace else. So in the summertime, they would go visit their relatives, their families back east. And people in Arizona didn't want to be in the 110 degree temperature in the summer. They would always come out and rent houses at the beach. So for 9 weeks or 10 weeks in the summer, my neighbors' houses were rented by mostly Arizonians, because a week's worth of rent would equal to a month's worth of mortgage payments.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we lived there year round. So what happened was, I remember this big old guy smoking a cigar walked up to me on my court one day and said, "Hey kid, you want a surfboard for a couple of weeks?" And I kind of like, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, I rented this board." And at the time, they were being rented from a guy they called Coffee Bean, Don Clark, that had a dive rental shop on Ventura Boulevard, right next to the roller coaster.
Okay.
He had Playboy bunny pictures glassed on.
Yeah.
The sailors would
so
rent them, and would ride them. But anyway, fortunately, the wood board that this guy had rented for his son, it was a 710 wood Velzy. And so I got to lug that for 2 weeks, and that really got me into surfing, having my own board to ride whenever I wanted. So that was my second board, was a wood board.
Okay.
Then my first board, Billy Castor made me a 710 fiberglass board. Cost me a whole $40. It was.
Is that because he's your friend?
That was because he was dating my sister, and fell asleep in our living room every night because
he should have given you for free.
He would get up and surf. Well, basically, it was for free.
Okay.
But that was my first board in Olympic. Then I went from there. Then I started getting boards from Mike Henson.
Okay.
Because he was, the guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Pre in the summer.
Yeah.
And
can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
Since you were friends with Mike Hansen, and then he was in Endless Summer, how was that?
Well,
did you guys all look at him differently?
No, we were just stoked for him.
Oh, stoked.
And the thing is, I was at PB Junior High in Pacific Beach.
Right.
And the Hobie shop run by Chuck Hasley was where Henson had started shaping Hobies. So we got postcards. We'd come from school in 9th grade and walk down to the Hobie shop, which was 3 blocks away. Okay. And here's the latest postcard from Mike Henson. And I remember him talking about a wave they discovered he called Torpedo Point, which turned out as Bruce Brown embellished it into
Cape St.
Francis.
Yeah.
But, Mike would relate the story of how they surfed it and where it came from and everything. But so I have a board at home that was shaped by Mike Henson, and on the nose it says "Sanded with Care" by Scipio, especially for hanky kind #1. Skip Fry was the sander.
Okay.
And it wasn't until Henson jumped ship with Hobie that Larry Gordon said, "Well, Skip, maybe you could start shaping." And so Skip started shaping boards. And then when Skip was still shaping and Henson came back to GNS after he had his model, he got a model, the Red Fin model, then there was a Skip Fry model, and I had Skip make me some boards.
Okay. Is Skip still shaping today?
He's about 100 yards from me right now, and he still shapes every day and still surfs every day.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, I don't know what it'd be like surfing without Skip Fry, because so many times growing up, surfing one of our favorite local spots, I'd be out there and it's just not, the tide's not right, the wind's not right, it's just not right. And then the first set, covering up the reefs, all right, and I always would just turn my head and there comes Skip walking up the point. So he got there right when it was not good every day. So I would miss those days and not having him around to get a good gauge of when it's happening.
Yeah, was he also kind of like a motivator? Like when you see him?
He gets you excited, that's for sure. Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, go back to the old days on the Mission Beach. On those lonely, cold days, you do have surfers around.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's days where it's like,
well,
if you ever paddle out and you're like, oh,
when I was in 7th grade, living in Mission Beach, and when you go to junior high, there's kids that come from different elementary schools. Back then, there was Mission Beach Elementary, where I went to, is no longer there. Martha Farnham, right by the beach in PB, that's no longer there. La Jolla, PB Elementary. So there was a group of guys, about 8 of us, that surfed. So we had a slumber party at my house. We took our logs and brought them into the living room, covered up the whole living room.
Okay.
And the next day was to go surfing. Well, that nice winter day, storm surf, gigantic blown out Victory at Sea waves. Well, we were going to go out surf anyway. You paddle out as far as you can before the big giant soup would hit you, and then you'd ride it to the beach. So yeah, we still surf. Those big, cold, windy,
no
giant
wetsuits.
days. No wetsuits. Back then, you had a fire going in the fire pit, and you'd run in until your skin turned red and get burnt by the fire, and then go out and catch a wave or two. But that was a funny thing. Up until later 60s, if you wore a wetsuit, you were considered a summer surfer because you didn't surf all year round. But there were exceptions. Now, Mike Henson, he would show up in the summertime with a wetsuit on, just the jacket with the beaver tail.
Yeah.
But that was okay because we understood Mike surfed Hawaii in the winter. So he was used to the warmer water in the winter. So, guys like that had a pass. That was cool because, well, they had a reason. They went to Hawaii and got warm in the winter. So when they came back and it was cold,
they were acclimatized.
Yeah,
that's rad.
That was funny.
So you were talking about postcards at the surf shop. Yeah. Are those postcards around anymore?
Oh no, that was what 1963, 64.
What do you think those are? Those things are probably.
They're probably somewhere in Chuck Hasley's son's stash of postcards.
They're still around?
I kind of doubt it. I think they would have surfaced by now.
Yeah, I would think so too.
But getting some first-hand stories from Mike Henson about that trip, it's better than a postcard.
Okay. Where are some of the places you've been to?
Well,
what was your first trip?
Well, what happened, I had a friend that I surfed with in Mission Beach.
Okay.
And he had cousins. They all lived together. His mother and his aunt, they were both little blonde ladies from Australia.
Okay.
And they married Navy pilots from the war. So growing up around him from the time of about 6 years old on, and his mom and his aunt, I always went, man, I want to go to Australia because look at these women. They're incredible, nice people. And when we were 14, 15, they'd make a trip to the liquor store and buy us a case of beer.
Yes.
So we could drink one beer and then throw up, but still. So when I was 20 years old, I went to Australia for a year.
So rad.
I stayed there for a year, and it was really great because I got off the boat. I took a boat at the time because I didn't like flying that much. Okay. Plus, it was cheaper.
And how long was that trip on the boat?
Well, I flew to Hawaii for $80 round trip.
Rad.
If I took the boat round trip to Hawaii on this excursion, it would have been another $150. So I saved money there. Plus, I saved 6 weeks of miserable cruise ship from California to Hawaii.
Okay.
So it was a 10-day trip to New Zealand. I got to stop in Fiji, see some waves from the boat.
But no surf.
A little bit of waves in the harbor that people surf, but not, Tavarua and Tavarua and those places. So I went to New Zealand for 6 weeks, and I was with a friend that had a Land Rover and surfed really good waves in New Zealand. Right. When I got to Australia, I bought a car at King's Cross, went to Cronulla because the Gordon Smith surfboard factory that Floyd Smith had started was there, and surfed Cronulla Point, which was a heavy local place. But
Yeah.
and I was polishing surfboards at the G&S shop down there.
Okay.
Surfed sand shoes. I surfed Sandon Point, which is an unbelievable, famous place down in Wollongong, south of Cronulla. Surfed it all by myself on a windy day, but that was a good wave. But my biggest thing was I drove 12 hours to Byron Bay because my whole thing was to get to Byron Bay.
All right.
And got to surf, Broken Head and Wategos and all those places, Talos.
What year is this?
This is 1970.
Okay, 1970.
Going into 71. In 71, I made it to Kira. Terry Baker, who was known as Weenie, and Alan Miss Campbell, they were on a trip south of Sydney. They came by the G&S factory. I met them. They go, yeah, we'll take you up to Queensland. So on that trip, we went to a couple of exotic places in Australia at the time. Seal Rocks, which was out from Newcastle. Several breaks out there. I mean, they break, and when it's flat in Newcastle and blown out, they're good size out there. Anyway, get back later. So I get to surf up in Queensland, and I got so bitten by mosquitoes.
Okay.
I got put in this guy's house with air conditioning and a net. Well, across the street was Peter Townend. And he was a skinny little 14, 15-year-old kid. And he had a pink board then. And they had the Kira Surf Club, or Tweed Head Surf Club. And they're all on the beach trying to organize contests. So I was surfing Kira pretty much by myself for a couple hours by that.
No way.
They're kind of like, oh, that's a California style, which was different than the Australians. So at that time, I got my foot in the door with some of the Aussies like that, and came back to California. And then I didn't go back to Australia again until 1980. But anyway, that was a good trip to surf Kira and Broken Head.
Okay.
Byron Bay, which is totally different nowadays. I've been back there a few years ago.
I think all those places are different.
It's totally different. As my houses,
wave or people or houses, or what do you mean?
The waves are still there, but now the access is pretty tough to get to. The roads are one way. There used to be one little intersection in Byron Bay, and you could drive up to where the lighthouse was and look down the coast and up the coast. But now it's a one-way street with condos all around. You can't even see anything. And as my Aussie friends say, that's right, mate, she's been loved to death down in Byron Bay.
Okay, some more. Okay, 1970. So you started surfing in the 60s?
1961.
1961. Did you see the crowd increase over those years? Well, was it problematic?
Well, the crowd thing was kind of like... it was crowded at the one spot, but the one spot was because that's where there was a parking lot and a change room and showers.
Yep.
There were still places that you could go surfing by yourself.
Well, Mission Beach, you can still get
there's
yourself.
Lots of different areas. But what happened kind of getting past the 60s, then when boards went short, and then surfing turned into like a territorial kind of thing.
Localized?
Heavy local thing.
Did you participate in that?
Well, that's what I'm saying, was kind of lucky, because before all that happened, people at La Jolla Shores would say, oh man, come up here and surf our waves.
Yeah.
And people at
you were looking for someone to surf.
Yeah, and you wanted to share your stuff. So
yeah, I get that.
The first time I surfed some heavy local spots, it was just with friends. So years later, when it became a local place, you go, God, I don't know if I want to go downstream to that wave. I heard it's heavy local. Then you paddle down and you go, well, where are the heavy locals? Oh, it's you guys? The guys I used to pink belly you guys? You're the heavy locals now? Oh, man. So when that territorial thing kind of came on, it was a bummer for a lot of people, but for people that had the deeper roots from the early 60s and before, they were just all friends of ours that had kind of
used to watch grow
surfing.
up.
And we'd surf together and travel together because, there wasn't that many people that you could go surf together with.
Okay. So it was mostly a lot of rumors and talk about locals.
Well, but there was some real, actual, territorial type things. I think it still goes on up in L.A. in some places. You hear about it. But
how bad was it? Was it like flattened tires, or was it like just talking smack?
That happens. It never happened to me, and I never did it.
Yeah.
But there's still some places in San Diego that still have that kind of vibe,
Culture kind of.
Yeah, and it's always like a new guy paddles out. Okay, put it this way: in the late '70s, I picked up Derek Hine and Steve Wilson from Australia. Their first trip here, like late '77, '78.
Right, yeah.
And I took them downstream to a heavy localized spot in Sunset Cliffs. Mm-hmm. Of course, you go there and you know everybody there, but it's like, oh man, what are you doing bringing crowd down here? But once those guys caught waves,
they're ripping them other guys out of the water,
those
right?
Guys are like, yeah. So it's even like that today at a local spot.
I would agree.
If you take off on your first wave and either back off and hair out or eat it, you're done. But if you take off and ride the waves, you kind of can get into the pecking order a little bit better. And it depends on your attitude, sharing waves or whatever.
Like respect, but be respectful.
Getting up to nowadays, it's hard to find a parking place ever since the pandemic. Everyone's gone to the beach.
Do you see more of a difference from 70s going into 80s than you do the last few years here? Is there a difference?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What's
Nowadays, because the big difference is if you wanted to surf, you had to wait for somebody to build your board, get it, and go surfing. Now, you walk to Costco, buy a $90 softboard, and you're a surfer. If you go to most surf spots in San Diego, at least, you're going to see 80% of the people in the water are on a softboard, and they have no idea. It's just like if you go to the bunny slope to learn how to ski, you're just there.
Okay, so this is a big question here for me. I'm really interested in your answer. So there is a surf culture through the stages.
Yeah.
Started as a young teenager or whatever. Is that gone today?
Well, it's getting closer.
No surf magazines.
Well, what it used to be, you get a surf magazine every quarterly. They look at pictures.
Okay.
You get the surf movie that came once a year.
Yep.
And you got to watch the people like Joey Cabell or Del Cannon or, Donald Takayama, Paul Stroud, George Downing. You get to see them surf. And then, after the movie, your friends and yourself would try to relive how'd they hold their hands, how that happened. You try to remember just from watching the movie.
Yeah.
Then it evolved into these videos. Now, kids in the 80s, they're watching the video, they see a guy over and over and over and over, and then they go out and emulate it right away.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
We had a longer learning curve because you kind of had to
all in your head.
Yeah, and going back and forth with your friends. No, he didn't. He had his hand like this. Oh, it was like this. It was like this. So that sped up. And then now, even a kid goes out, he's got his dad or his mom shooting pictures of him, and he can look and see himself surf and realize, wow, I'm still kind of a kook. I do kind of wave my arms too much. I do stick my butt out. I do have the hook arm.
Yeah.
And then they can correct that quicker, too.
Okay.
Because they can see it for themselves. So now, I'm amazed. I watch movies on Instagram or online, and I'm seeing kids I've never heard of that are young doing things I never thought would ever be possible.
Yeah.
On a surfboard that we used to just fantasize in a cartoon would be it. So, now, geez, I'm lucky to stand up and trim and look good. Those guys are doing stuff, out of the water like skateboarding and landing it and continue on. It's amazing what surfing's doing now. That brings me to the wave pool situation.
Okay. Talk about wave pools then.
The first wave pool I went to in Arizona called...
was that the one from North Shore movie?
Yes.
Okay.
And
that looked like a piece of shit.
That was a funny spot because it was like a big toilet bowl that flushed and the water would pop up and you put 4 surfers on one side of the pool, 4 on the other, and by the time you got to their feet, most of them would fall off. So I planned it. I'd get as far as I could to the left part of the pool to go right, because by the time I got up, they were all falling off and I could ride the wave all the way across myself.
Yeah.
Then the bummer is you kind of crashed on the shore dump onto a concrete ledge.
Yeah.
But now...
What year was that?
That was 72 or 3.
Really?
4.
It was built that early?
Yeah. Tempe Big Surf. And what's funny about that, Mike Gillard, who that movie... North Shore is about, actually did learn how to surf in that pool.
Oh, really? So that movie's kind of based loosely on a real life?
On his story.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mike Gillard is a fantastic surfer now, lives out here. And
awesome.
I was in Noosa with him 4 or 5 years ago, and he said, oh, yeah, that story's about my brother and I. And I went, no way. He goes, oh, yeah, I learned how to surf at Big Surf. We moved to Maui, and years later, people would go like, wow, man, you're a good surfer. How'd you learn to surf? Oh, I learned how to surf at Big Surf in Tempe. And so in Maui, some movie producer, some said, wait a minute, that's a good story. And they wrote the story, North Shore, based on kind of the real life of Mike Gillard.
I never heard this.
Doing that.
That's fascinating.
He's surfs in club contests for our club, Windansea Surf Club, and he's always in the finals if not winning. And
that's
a fantastic surfer. But yeah, he learned how to surf in the toilet bowl.
That's funny.
And ended up years later.
In the 70s.
Yeah. But so now, wave pools, there's the ranch and other surfing pools. But I've made a couple of surfboards in the last month for these guys that shared videos because they're in a consortium that do wave pools. They showed me one in Brazil that was the most insane wave. It was wave after wave. It was beautiful water. It was real surfing, real waves. I mean, I look at the ranch and it's a perfect wave, which, come on, you're going to get tired of riding that. You get the same motion every time.
You think so?
It seems like that.
Okay.
To me, it's like having a contest there. It gets as nitpicky as watching the gymnastics in the Olympics.
Can I say something? One thing about that? So I would agree with you when the surfboarders are doing it. But if you watch the longboarders in it, like last year, it looked more suiting for like a longer board.
Probably.
It looks better.
It might be. I mean, they could adjust the dial. But what I wanted to get to is that's a fantastic wave. It outdid most other wave machines that they have out there. Mm-hmm. But now they're building waves like that go left and right in the pool, and you don't have to wait minutes and minutes for the next wave. They have something like 400 waves an hour, rideable waves, pumping and pumping, which, back when you're in high school and your family's saying, you can't surf your whole life, you can't be a beach bum, you got to, go to college and get an education and make something of yourself. Well, we always say, oh, a wave pool, we could be a teacher, just like ski lift guys, but a wave pool year-round, waves and, all that opened up. It wouldn't just be the coast. But that's starting to happen, I think. But nowadays, you got to have a lot of money to ride those waves.
But as more of them come out, shouldn't the price drop, maybe?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, yeah.
And what about your thoughts on wave pools? Do you like them? Do you like Middle America surfing? Or do you like it?
Here's the thing. It used to be like... when the territorial thing happened and the people, the beach, like, these people, inland people coming and surfing. My attitude was like, how can I begrudge anybody that wants to surf, knowing how cool surfing is? And the thing is, there's still kind of maybe 3 thoughts, but there's definitely 2 different thoughts. There's people that look at surfing as competitive, be famous, make money, which, you see a kid on a basketball court and wants to be a pro basketball player, that's a pipe dream. You got 1 out of 10,000 ever make it to the pros. Same with surfing in competition. But then you get the lifestyle surfer that surfs every day, builds their life around surfing. That's like why I started building surfboards, because if the waves were good, you can put everything down and go surf and catch the waves. Whereas my friends that had the 40-hour-a-week job, they had to be lucky to catch waves on the weekend, which was more crowded. So nowadays, I don't even look at the waves on the weekend because it's a nightmare how crowded it is. But that's kind of how it is nowadays. There's the people that just surf lifestyle. That really changed with the boogie board, because with the boogie board, all of a sudden mom and the kids could go to the beach and ride a boogie board instead of having to have a life mat that you had to blow up and hope it wouldn't let the air out. You could ride the waves, and then they started making surfboards out of those, and now they started surfing. So now mom's surfing, dad's surfing, the next generation, these kids grow up and meet other girls and guys on the beach that are grown up, and now they've got kids, and so it's a pretty cool thing, really.
Yeah.
What surfing has become from where it started. One thought on that is, I remember being a surf bum. Oh, you surf all day. You're doing nothing. Well, when hippies came in the scene, 65, 66, 67, it elevated surfers, because all of a sudden that girl that I'm going to try to take out on a date, when their dad says, "So what do you do?" and you say, "You surf." Oh, good. At least you were doing something. You weren't a hippie.
Oh, okay.
So
it worked to your advantage.
The hippie scene kind of took the negative thing out of being a guy that surfed, because at least you were doing something. Here's what happened. So it used to be, I can remember when Mike Doyle won the Duke contest at 27.
And he surfed really well, right?
Yes. And the thought at that time was like, being 18, 19 is, well, at least I can surf until I'm 27, because look, he's still ripping.
Yeah.
Because at that time, it really was like, the Gidget era and stuff. It was a teenage fad. You surfed, then you grew up and had a family, and you couldn't work. So being connected to surfing, so the people kept surfing, and the longer they surfed, the younger they stayed, and the more they surfed. Well, nowadays, it started about late 80s with the longboard resurgence after all the boards got cut short.
I remember that well.
And all the grandpas would be coming down, or even the older dads be coming down bringing their kids to surf. And they'd see an old Tony that they surfed with when they were a teenager. And the kids are riding shortboards, but then one by one, they'd see their old Tony on a longboard. And they'd say, "I thought they quit making those things."
Yeah.
And so then they started surfing again.
Yeah.
And then once the dad and the grandpas were surfing and the kids could go surfing, then that's when the kids started going like, "Well, I want to try to ride an old log," because that's you look at Joel Tudor, who just stays connected to those roots. So then that really added to the surf scene with the resurgence of the longboard, because then the old 50-year-old guy that's kind of out of shape
that hasn't surfed in 20, 30 years
could get a longboard and go out and start catching waves and be stoked again.
All right, so let's talk about that.
The longboard resurgence, getting the families back into it, and then
is that a good thing?
It's a good thing if you're getting older.
It's a good thing for your business too.
Well,
of course,
I can tell you. You talk about that in
your business of building
in the 80s when windsurfing came on the scene.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah,
windsurfing came on the scene. Some of us in factories, like at Diamond Glassing, we were doing windsurfers, 500 at a time for like O'Brien skis or something. And there was a time I thought I'd never shape a surfboard again except for myself, because everyone was windsurfing and got into that. And that also kind of what led it into the longboard resurgence, because when you go to the beach with your windsurfer and there was no wind, well, I'll try to ride this on a wave. And then, wait a minute, if I thinned it out and made it like a normal board, you could ride it. So then you started riding longboards again. That's how I got back into longboarding. Because
did you quit surfing?
No, I didn't quit, but I was riding shortboards.
Oh, gotcha.
But I was windsurfing, and one day the waves were just not. The wind was gone, and I just thought I'd paddle out on my windsurfer, which was kind of a glorified surfboard at the time, and catch a wave. And then I thought, you know what? I'll make myself a longer board. But then that's kind of what helped, because really windsurfing died off because in San Diego, at least, the wind's not really that favorable to windsurf. So anybody that got really good at windsurfing all moved to Maui. And
surf
so that and riding waves and stuff. But
so then your thoughts on, let's say, windsurfing, boogie boarding you brought up, a couple of other things you brought up, change surfing, change the culture.
Right.
So let's go back to culture for a second. And then, you being a windsurfer, were those other windsurfers all surfers before? Or?
No, most of them were sailors.
Okay, sailors.
They were sailors.
That's kind of interesting.
They knew how to use the sail. They had.
Yes.
They didn't have good board control.
Yeah.
But they knew about jibing and broad reach, all that stuff.
Oh, I don't want to lose my thought. Okay, so then you said they decided the wind wasn't right and they started surfing.
No, what I said was the guys that got really good at windsurfing, riding the waves in San Diego, one by one moved to Maui because there the wind's better and more performance oriented. And then that's when windsurfing kind of died out.
Yep.
You know, and then it's kind of come back with the kite surfing.
Yep.
Because it's not.
But is that the same or is that different?
It's different because you're not tripping around a mast in front of you.
And the boards are a lot smaller.
And the way those things are made, there's some type of gas in that kite that actually gives you some lift as well. So, you're not relying 100% on wind.
Did you do that?
No. I did help Mike Doe try to get out one time on his because he needed me to hold his kite while he got his board ready when he started getting into it. He was probably, 65, 70 years old at the time.
And he just said, I'm going to go for it?
But he was going for it because, he was a heavy waterman.
That's
Mike
rad.
Doyle was a fantastic waterman.
Super rad. Okay, so then now we have, then the stand-up paddle came in 10, 12 years ago or something?
Well... the first time I saw the stand-up paddle, which I guess it's always been around in some form, was at a contest at Malibu, and all of a sudden some guy comes flying into the point on a stand-up paddleboard.
From
paddling.
Third Point?
I think it was Laird Hamilton who lived up the coast at Point Dune.
Yep.
Came in, and then you started seeing a lot of the stand-up paddle stuff. And, that's always was a joke because like a canoe guy out in the water, they would take a lot of people out if they ate it. And plus, a lot of those guys that were into that weren't surfers. They didn't have wave knowledge. So they would just screw everything up and run you over and have no clue. Same thing with the stand-up paddle guys that would come out and then they started wanting to ride waves. And, those big old things would catch the wave before you do and they would ruin it. But my attitude's changed about that in a sense. You look at people like Mickey Munoz, who is as grassroots a surfer as you're ever going to find.
There's going to be some always.
And his hips went out. He couldn't stand up anymore.
I know a guy like that now.
So now I see Mickey out on a little SUP, paddling out, catching waves and surfing. I mean, how could I say Mickey Munoz doesn't have a right to catch waves and ride them like a surfboard, but he has to do it with a stand-up paddleboard?
Okay, but that's different because he knows the...
Yeah.
I don't know the word.
He's got wave judgment and knows the rhythm of the ocean and knows the
culture. He knows the I'm missing the word.
He's good. He's
different.
Well, and there's a lot of guys like that.
There are some, not a lot.
There's life after hip replacement for some of those guys.
And knee replacements.
The stand-up paddle.
And that's fair.
And the one thing I think about that is when stand-up paddling came out into the ocean, that's when we started hearing about all these sharks all the time. It's
Good
like
point.
all of a sudden people are seeing those sharks and they're standing up and they can actually see something underneath them. Where you're laying down, you never did. But I had a windsurfing experience back in 1965.
Oh, there was windsurfers then?
No, it was Kurt Slater and myself went north of Crystal Pier up by PB Point on a summer day surfing. We walked up with our boards and our towels and everything. And the wind came up, and we decided, well, let's just paddle back to Crystal Pier. Well, we got our towels out, and we were sitting on our towels, and they're all wet. And Kurt, getting into sailing, said, let's do this. So on my 9-foot board, and he on his 9-foot board, we put one edge of the towel under one knee, and he did on the other knee, and we held it up, and we started catching the wind, and we started gliding from the point down to Crystal Pier.
No way.
And we're going so fast, we're laughing. We'd fall over.
No way.
But eventually, after a couple blocks, we got it going, and we're going. Well, outside of Law Street, which is the only place you could surf north of Crystal Pier by this time in the summer, there's all these guys surfing. They're paddling out to, what's going on? Here's these two little guys holding up beach towels and gliding down, 50 yards out past them, going down. So we had a little bit of a windsurf experience at that time.
That's funny.
It was funny. Yeah, I remember we got going so fast one time, but we were laughing so hard we just collapsed.
So I mean, did you do that often or just
one-time shot?
One time. That's rad. Okay, and now they have the foil boards. So I'm going to a point here.
The foil boards. How do those things work?
I
have no idea. I see guys get on those things and start pumping, and they do it in rivers. They do it In bays, they do it. It's incredible. I was with the family in Hawaii a couple years ago, and we were staying in Kailua on the east side, which is real windy on Oahu.
Yep.
And we're seeing these guys, kite surfers, with foils. They're going as fast as any speedboat I've ever seen go.
Yeah.
They're hauling. I've never got into it. I figure if I get any beach time, I'm going to go surfing. And,
Gotcha there.
But, if you live on Maui or someplace and you're always looking for something to do because you're in Hawaii, that's, they went from skateboarding down hills with a sailboarding to now foiling. But how those things work, I have no idea.
Yeah, trippy. Okay, so you have all these different things that come into surfing, but they're all kind of grouped loosely as surfing. Am I correct? From the boogie board?
Well, they're riding waves.
There, yeah. Okay.
And as my good friend Terry Fitzgerald in Australia coined a phrase, ride your own way. However you want to ride.
Like, don't judge other people.
Yeah. Just and it started out as like how your board is: twin fin, single fin, tri fin.
Yeah, that's true.
4 fin, long board, short board. Yeah. Like nowadays, people's talking about the big. I want to get a glider because I got to compete with people catching a wave. And they ask me, "Do I make gliders?" I say, "Yeah, all my boards are gliders." I don't know if they're 4 foot or 10 foot or 12. They're all supposed to glide.
That's true.
Trim.
Yeah.
So, but. And I do the same thing with now the mid-lengths.
Okay.
What's a mid-length?
It's just better paddling.
But to me, all surfboards are surfboards, whether it's long, short, 8 foot, 7 foot. It's all. That's the other thing that's helped our business. Back when I grew up surfing, you had one board for that year, and then the next year you'd get something else. Usually,
if you're lucky.
And the thing was, if you started whipping your old longboard around too much, you got to get a longer, heavier board to keep you smooth, keep your style. But now, I make boards for a guy who wants a fish in his quiver, wants an egg in his quiver, wants a big giant logger in his quiver, wants a high performance longboard, wants a short board.
Yep.
It's like a golf bag now with kids people that are surfing. 5, 6 boards or even more.
You need it.
And
you need them.
And the thing that's great about it enhances the days you get to go surfing on, but you're not using it up every day like the old days with your one board. So they last longer. It's more economical to do it.
Okay.
And just to collect them, they have different ways for different conditions.
How many boards do you go when you go check the waves?
Yeah.
How many boards do you have in the car?
Well, I'm basically kind of a 2-board guy.
Okay.
Long board, short board.
Okay. Are you still riding a shortboard?
Yeah, I ride a 6'4"
Wow.
power hole. It paddles me easily like a longboard, but it's so stinking maneuverable. I'm surprised I had never made a trip to the chiropractor yet.
Really?
But it works.
It's probably kept you away from there, actually.
It's really good. And, people, what I find when making surfboards is somebody will go from a short board to a longer board, and they'll go, "Oh, yeah, boy, those things are so hard to turn." I go, they're not hard to turn. They turn just as easily, just not as fast. And the thing that happens is when you're going from a short board, your mind's eye is seeing the nose of the board in a certain place.
So your foot's too far forward.
So when you hop up on a long board, you think you're way back. And you go to turn and it doesn't turn.
You catch a rail.
These things are just so hard to turn. No,
your foot's not in the right spot.
You got to just get back. And I learned that from Skip Fry, who... he rides 11-foot, 12-foot boards.
And still whipping it around?
And shorter. And he goes, when you go out the first time on a long board, the first thing you got to do is get up, stand back until you feel yourself over the fins.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
There's like a classic nose rider type board that's softer rail that holds the water, sucks on it. You get people like, "Oh, I want to get a nose rider." Okay, what are you riding now? Well, I'm riding an 8-foot wave storm, but I want a nose ride. Well, how long have you been surfing? Oh, like 3 months. Well, let me tell you something. If I use Tiger Woods' driver, who hits at 350 yards, I could use his driver. I'm still only going to hit at 190 yards. So it's not like I'm going to make you a board that makes you a nose rider.
Right.
You've got to learn wave judgment and how to do it. You can't just make.
How old is this guy coming to you?
Oh, they're it used to be guys that were my age or younger. But now in the late 90s, I'd get guys that would come in and they would say they wanted to get a new surfboard. I say, what are you riding? They go, oh, I rode this guy's old log. I want to get something more. Okay, I got a good reference point. But then it got to be like, oh, I've never surfed before. I just moved to San Diego. I live at the beach, and I see guys out surfing. I want to start surfing. And I would say, well, there's a friend of mine that gives surf lessons. Why don't you go take a surf lesson and see if surfing is really for you? Because it's not like snow skiing where you get up there and you got gravity and you got a constant variable and you do this and do that, you're doing it. It's not like water skiing where they're pulling you behind a boat. I go, if you've water skied, it'd be like trying to learn how to water ski behind a rowboat, surfing. You know, it's not something, and usually that young teenage guy had the energy to do the trial and error of learning how to surf. But then you get people now that are starting to surf 50, 60 years old. It's just a different, pattern for them to learn.
So let's go way back to kind of the beginning of the conversation. Is that what's killing the culture? Because no. I really feel like people don't know the history of surfing anymore. Well, it's gone. Except guys like you are keeping it alive.
Well, yeah, I'm a young guy compared to the guys. I mean, you look at the people that have passed away in the last few years. Greg Knoll.
Yep.
God, I just hate saying their names because they just, and even the younger guys. But that was the culture. And then you've got young guys who grew up with dads that were hooked on that culture that still kind of respect it. But then again, you get guys that they've watched surf videos, they've skateboarded, they're going to rip, tear, shred, be a surfer, not realizing that there is kind of that Hawaiian culture consciousness to it. I mean, what's better than being out in the ocean and looking out and seeing nothing for thousands of miles, and behind you is the traffic and crowds and jobs,
bullshit, really,
schools and hassles
stress
and stuff. I mean, it's just Bob McTavish told me when I surfed a lot with him in 1969. He was here for a while. He goes, out surfing, it's a wash machine for the brain.
Yeah,
cleans your brain.
Yeah,
and I never forgot that.
So where do you see surfing in 25, 50 years?
I definitely see more of the wave pool kind of thing.
Yep.
Because the one negative thing for being a surfer, in a sense, is you can't just surf anytime you want to surf. The wave conditions have to cooperate. The wind, the swell directions, even the crowds nowadays. So I at first, wave pools just seemed like, oh, that's a way they're going to justify polluted oceans, because now you can just go surf in a wave machine and let the ocean go to hell. But now I see it with how more machines are coming out and getting better. I have a group of guys in Corpus Christi, Texas, that I've been selling boards to their shop since the 80s.
What's the name of the shop?
It's Wind and Wave Water Sports.
Yeah, I've been there.
Great guys. Frank Floyd and his son Nate.
Yep.
They drive up to Waco when there's going to be storms or something, and they I see them. They're riding waves. They're doing aerials. They're hanging tin. The waves are pumping. They're surfing, and it's a wave pool. They might have to drive a couple hundred miles, but and they're great surfers in the ocean. And I see wave pools as being a great thing. I hope they get cheaper to use, because right now, I'm priced out of going to the ranch.
Yeah, no kidding.
And you look at that. Even if you get in there, how many waves you're getting for that?
Yeah.
But now the wave pools are making more waves, more variables.
There's like 3 coming to Palm Springs shortly.
That's the guy that today he picked up his board, and they're going to the ranch, but they're working on that one in Palm Springs.
There's your connection.
Yeah, well,
you'll be there soon enough.
The only connection I got there is they bought 2 boards from me that they want to use in the pool. But they also shared with me this wave that they're making a duplicate of from Brazil up at Palm Springs. Is just, beautiful weather. I feel like I'm in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Being at that wave pool. And plus the waves are different. It's not a machine perfect thing where you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because like when I tell people they learn how to surf, the more you do it, the more it becomes a subconscious effort. you don't consciously do things when you're surfing. You react. And the more wave conditions you're into, the more your mind will react before your brain tells you to. It's subconscious. And so now the wave pools are getting to that kind of more of a reactionary kind of thing instead of just this constant variable like a ski slope, which I think makes surfing so good because you can't bowl a 300 game surfing. There's always room for improvement. There's always a better, way to do it, shorter, longer, some type of board. But that's what keeps surfing so attractive in the future because you're never going to bowl a 300 game every time and go, I've done that, been there, see you later.
How is the wave pool guy that learns in Arizona or wherever, Wyoming, wherever, and he's first time in the ocean, is he going to be struggling?
I would say they would because it's not machine wave.
Yeah,
different
they
angles,
don't know where to sit.
Different angles, don't know where to sit. The tidal change, the wind factor.
You think it'll frustrate them? And they'll just
well, the frustration that they probably will experience is what I see a lot of people at a break in San Diego called Tourmaline Canyon.
Yep.
The waves break at Tourmaline. It looks like they're going to just break so far out. And they're going, oh, it's going to break. It's gonna break. And they paddle out, and it doesn't break. And then they turn around and start paddling for this wave that looks like it's going to break, and then it backs off.
Yeah.
And so they're frustrated, and that's when they go, I get a longer board. I go, well, that makes up for a lot of lack of wave judgment, having board speed to paddle. Because you see a guy on a 6-foot board, he's just sitting there, turning around, taking 1 or 2 strokes, he's in the wave because he's ridden waves enough to know that's where you sit.
And then surfing over there and going to also or the next day they decide I'm going to go surf Crystal Pier.
Yeah.
There's 2 different ways.
Yeah.
They're not
Totally
breaking
different.
Yeah. One's soft, one's a little heavier.
That's just all understand the wave judgment. Like I do at a new place, when a wave comes and I look behind it when it breaks and I see where the white water broke. Oh, it broke over there first.
You know how to read the ocean.
Yeah, from behind, and you kind of can play it. And then, you can line up things on the...
Which comes natural, probably.
Yeah, line up on the thing where most people just if a wave comes, they turn around and take off. Even though you're in the barrel flying down, they're not looking at you. They're looking at the wave going to break. And,
Have you had an incident like that?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times. I've had one time...
Have you been injured by anybody?
No, thank goodness I haven't been injured. But I remember one time, a few years back, waves were small, so I'm riding the waves, getting speed up to go all the way through, and there's some beginner taking off, and I can't believe they're going to drop in, and I end up trying to cut back real quick to miss them, and I fall off, and I lose my board, and the guy's first thing was, Don, how come you're not wearing a leash?
Just oblivious.
And the thing is, leashes used to be, before leashes, that was our crowd control. If you're at a good surf spot, and a guy loses his board, he's out of the lineup until he goes and gets his board and comes back. If you were a better surfer, you could ride the wave, paddle back out. And that was kind of, the reward for getting better.
Yep.
Now, it's like you don't have to get better to still be in the way.
Okay, so here's a question. Business-wise, with all these new surfers and surfers, you're better off than you were in the past, probably?
Oh, yeah.
I'm guessing.
Well, now,
you're
it's
keeping
better
busy.
Off. Well, I've always been busy.
Yeah.
But,
no, I'm not, yeah,
but now, there's fewer of us kind of guys. And
yeah, that's true.
Still people. I mean, fortunately, there's still people that learned how to surf on a wave storm that now they want to get a board that's the right color and their name on it or something. So custom boards are still happening.
No, for sure.
In the last 2 years, what's gone off the Richter for local board builders probably everywhere, but definitely in San Diego County, is a couple of giant surfboard factories kind of closed down with the Chinese, Asian onslaught, fire wires and whatever that brings those boards in. They get built offshore. So the demand for boards getting built kind of closed those shops down. There's like 2 shops with 100 boards a week going through. Now, the pandemic comes. First they say they close the beach. You can't go to the beach, stay home. And then after a while they realize, oh, no, you better be outdoors. So now everyone's outdoors and everyone's bought a flexible boogie board type surfboard. And everyone's surfing and they get stimulus money. Wow, I can buy a new surfboard because I'm surfing all the time. And then what happened is, okay, now we're shaping a lot of boards and we're taking them to the local glass shop, but they're only geared to do 20 boards a week. Yep. Now they've got 100 boards sitting there to get started. And then it put a glut. And it kind of enhanced the thing like, oh, wow, if I can get these boards through quicker, then they gravitate to get a board from you. And because of my roots and the people I deal with that I've been working with for 50 years, 40 years in some cases, I get a little priority getting those boards through quicker. So that's helped me and helped a lot of other people. But it's also helped a lot of people raise their prices because the demand's so high, and they really haven't put the time in to justify.
Well, materials probably went up too, though.
Materials have gone up because it's all petroleum-based product.
Yep.
And so there's been a big increase in the last 3 to 4 months, a couple times.
I'm going crazy because I have so many questions. Okay, well, don't you think that you guys, do you want to be called a board builder or shaper? I mean, what's your title?
Just a board builder.
Board builder. You like that title?
I say manual labor. It's like digging a ditch.
But you guys have been underpaid, I believe, for so long.
Well, that's kind of relative.
Is it?
Underpaid? I mean,
how many bro deals have you given?
Oh, everyone's a bro.
Okay, well, there you go.
Everyone's a bro. And,
right.
And still, I still think gasoline should be 22 cents a gallon. So it's hard. It's hard for me to look at a guy in the eye and go, this board's going to be $1,500 because the guy across the street's selling for $1,500, and he's been working 2 years at building boards, and I've done it for 50, 60 years.
Okay.
But I look and I go, this is like $1,200. Is that all? And then you got the people going like, must be something wrong if they're not that expensive.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense too.
And I run into that. Like, God, that's all it is. I mean, this week I had a guy whose kids were in my wife's class down in PB years ago, and he always thought, getting a board from Mrs. Warner's husband, he must be so expensive. And then he found out, my God, you're half the price of these other guys. I go, if I wanted to make a lot of money, I'd be a drug dealer. And I just, I mean, really, in a sense.
So you're being fair.
In a sense, I mean, okay, so I could actually make $100 an hour if I really wanted to put my head down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good.
That's good. That's great.
For somebody that works whenever they feel like it.
Perfect.
And I'm collecting Social Security.
All right.
And some guys say, well, God, I could make $500 an hour.
Yeah.
And then that could be groovy.
Yeah.
But, I would rather just be economically reasonable.
Yep.
Still make a good product. Because in the surfing industry, it kind of, it turned into two things. There was either the high-end board or the cheap board.
Okay.
And I would always do a high-end board in the middle. And that kind of forced me out of the market because people either wanted to spend a lot of money for a really good board or buy a really cheap board. There was no room. It's like when the Japanese came to Hawaii and they started buying property. Oh, we want to buy your house on the beach. Oh, it's $1 million. Oh, I want a $2 million home. Okay, I'll sell it to you for $2 million. And that's what happened. And all of a sudden, the real estate market ate it because they were just overpriced. And so now you gotta make a high end board, and a lot to do with my end of board building is psychological warfare. If they think they're paying a lot of money for it, they're going to make sure that board works because they paid a lot of money for it. But I want them to know that they're getting a really good deal and it's worth it. And used to be people say, oh, you want to have planned obsolescence, like Detroit cars falling apart so they have to buy a new one. I go, no, I want them to last longer because if they last longer, they'll have more good days on it. They'll get to know that board better. And when they want to get a new board, they'll come back and get another board from me because I don't want them to come back in 3 months. I'm already too busy for that.
Yeah.
So I want them to stay away, have a good time on that board.
That's funny.
And then,
that's funny.
Come back with that.
Okay, so how does everyone get a hold of you? You go on Instagram, Hank Warner.
There's Hank Warner Shapes on Instagram.
Yep.
There's www.hankwarner.com, which will give you a form and contact information. Or if you just Google Hank Warner, you'll see all kinds of stuff.
Over. Yeah.
A lot of things on there. But, you know, I always need an appointment because I'm here at the same time all the time, but I like to know if someone's coming. So if I drop the planer and split, there's not anybody
you're not
getting
like
left
dogging
out.
Somebody.
You know, you could be like Skip Fry, and he parks his car as far away from the beach because he wants to get in the water before anybody can tackle him trying to get aboard from him.
Oh, yeah.
And, but, you know, I hung the shingle out, and I'm available.
That's so rad.
I don't know how much longer.
Are you thinking about retiring?
No, you never retire. Right now, I'm paying for my early retirement. I retired growing up, traveling the world, traveling to Ireland, traveling to the Caribbean, traveling to the East Coast, traveling to Australia, traveling to Hawaii. Now I'm paying for it, so I got to work for my retirement.
Okay.
But it keeps you healthy.
One final question that I'm kind of interested in. What would your parents think of you today, looking back, especially since they brought you to this kind of... Did they bring this?
Well, fortunately, my mom was the kind of person that, like, whatever makes you happy, son, it's all good.
Rad.
But I do remember when my sister was dating Bill Castor, and, you know, back in the middle 60s, like Hinson, Castor, Diffenderfer, guys that shaped surfboards, they made about $200 a week. The average wage was about $80 a week.
Wow. So they're living...
And, you know, that's why Castor and Hinson would, there's a South Swell, let's go surf Ala Moana. It's only a $160 round trip to Hawaii. We'll go surf there for the weekend.
Rad.
And rents, my first place that I rented when I was 17 was $70 a month, 2 blocks from the beach, 1 bedroom, and I shared it with a friend. We paid $35 a piece. You know, so living was cheaper, and that $200 went a long ways.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom saying to my sister, well, yeah, but if you marry him, I mean, he can't make surfboards his whole life, because there was that fixed
Stigma.
thing that it ends when you're, you know, out of your teen years.
Yeah.
If Billy Castor lived today, he'd be commanding top dollar and have all the work he could have and be making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So my mom lasted till about 3 years ago.
Oh.
And
cool.
She was up close to 96, and she just thought it was great that I was self-sufficient, didn't have to, you know, then had a job, worked. You know, it got me to England a couple times, to Spain, shaping boards, Australia. I traveled a lot on the East Coast because at one time, 80% of all surfboards made in America went to the East Coast, because you look at Maine to the tip of Florida to the Mexico in the Gulf, that's a lot of surfers. California basically was just Santa Barbara to the border, 200 miles.
Yeah.
Whatever. So everything went to the East Coast. And
wow,
so I traveled the East Coast. And then when trade shows came, you just had to go to the trade show to get connected.
Yeah.
But at one time I had 30 dealers on the East Coast. Now I'm down to like 2 or 3, because I'm just shrunk my footprint, because I don't have to mass produce them. And if I did, I couldn't get them glassed anyway. And so just do 5 a week or so, 1 a day.
Wow.
One a day every day.
Well, thank you so much, Hank, for joining us here at the QuiverCast. I totally appreciate it. This is a rad interview. It's so much fun.
We're kind of just rambling on.
No, it's perfect. That's exactly how we like it.
I mean, I just hope that some young kid that's surf stoked, that's got surf pictures all over his wall, and, you know, will just realize that what Phil Edwards said back in the early 60s, the best surfer in the water is the guy having the most fun.
All right. You believe that?
Yeah.
All right. All right, you guys, everyone. This is Mike and Hank. We're out of here. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please follow us on Instagram and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us 5 stars if you listen to us on Apple. And do me a favor and tell a friend that QuiverCast is back. I'd like to thank Glue Factory and Dave Hegstrom for the music. And I'll see you on the lineup. Hey, you guys, Endless Summer box set. This thing is legit. It's authentic, numbered certificate in it. It has a 5-frame film strip from the original print. You will literally own a piece of history. It has a specially minted bronze medallion. Dude, that thing's sick. Okay, there's so much more here. Go to the show notes. There's a link on there. Go check this piece of history out. This thing's rad. Seriously. Smithsonian American History Museum has it. It took 4 years of research with 3.5 in production, all hand assembled. This thing's rad. So much to this awesome box set. Remastered DVD, sharper images than the original film, but dude, this thing's so sick. Link in the show notes.